All right, welcome back to the No Effects Podcast. I'm your host, Lane, and you might see somebody over there that you haven't seen.
Oh,
Well, he's been on the show one
I,
time before.
once. Yeah.
Also, is a regular as a member of my stream team. So I'd like to welcome Rev once again back to the podcast. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's going pretty good. How's everybody else doing? Looking forward to reviewing this new set.
Yeah, spoilers, I guess. But yeah, that's what we're here to do. The
You're
new
reading the title.
set.
Come on.
You already knew what you were getting into, but, we got to kind of keep a little mystery. So we are talking about the newest MTG set that just fully spoiled about a week ago. I think pre-release starts today. So we're hitting it, hitting the iron, striking the iron where it's hot. This new set is called Aetherdrift. It takes place on the plane formerly known as Kaladesh, which is now a Vishkar. And seemingly is, I'm not familiar on the lore. I didn't pay attention to the lore at any point this set, but it feels kind of like the old Kamigawa, or the last Kamigawa, where it was like in the future. This kind of feels like Kaladesh in the future, but they changed the name of the set due to some sort of racially ambiguous whatever, something to do with the language that was not flattering. So yeah, I can't speak on that either, but it does seem like it's Kaladesh in the future because of the art and other things, but it's also still a set that is reminiscent of that block because it does still have vehicles as one of the major mechanics, and it still has energy as one of the major mechanics. Ironically, we are not talking about anything energy related in this set review. But
when have we ever talked about anything energy related?
We did in Fallout, and we made a big deal about how Fallout actually provided a lot of things that kind of added to what came out with Kaladesh, and we were hoping that if we did, I don't know that we knew about Aetherdrift at that point, but we were hoping that if we ever did revisit Kaladesh, that we'd get more, and that maybe eventually there could be a cEDH viable commander that did stuff with energy, which would be cool, because it is a nifty mechanic. For those of you who may not know, energy is basically a separate resource from your mana, your life, anything else. It's tracked on usually a token that says energy, and it is something that doesn't move, isn't affected by anything in the game except for you spending it. So it's just a bankable resource that you can use for various things. And to this point, it really still isn't busted that I know of, but this set may have pushed something forward. I know they printed a couple cards, I think, in one of the Modern Horizon sets as well. So there's been a little bit of support for it, but it was super busted in Standard when Kaladesh came out, so it was kind of
I know I tried making a cEDH energy deck once, but it was with Brago for all the ETB energy effects.
Sure,
but
sure,
it's not easy, that mechanic.
Yeah, it's still not there, and I still don't think it's there, but they've added some support, and maybe somebody can try. Maybe even in something more casual, maybe it'll work. Also, notably, they've added a couple new mechanics, because this set is very focused on the vehicle side of things. There is Start Your Engines, which is basically you get a speed counter when the thing ETBs, and doesn't necessarily have to be a creature. And then I think it's during each of your turns, if one of your opponents loses a life, you gain a speed. Once you get to 4 of those counters, it's max speed, and then there's usually some sort of additional effect that happens at that point. We do talk about at least one of those I can think of today. The other new mechanic was Exhaust. Yeah, which is basically any ability that is printed on a creature. Loot is a good example. We're not going to talk about that card, so we can talk about it now. The new loot has 3 different abilities based on the 3 colors that it is. Each one is like tap, pay the color, tap it, and get the effect. It's like draw a card, bolt something, whatever. You can only use that ability once while that permanent exists. So unless you're in a blink deck, or you're going to sacrifice it and then recast it, or sacrifice it, reanimate it, etc., those effects are only going to be usable one time per game, or at least until that permanent leaves and then recast. So it is kind of a weird mechanic. It's kind of like Exert, but instead of like it not untapping and then being able to use the ability again later, it's just you can't use it ever again. And most of the ones that have Exhaust, they have like a couple different options for the most part. So you're not just doing it once and then being like, well, this creature's useless. I don't know. Neither of these mechanics are really like my cup of tea, but they're fine. I guess. I was excited more to see more vehicles printed in the format to where we might find some that are good. I guess your mileage may vary, but and then the energy thing, which we already discussed, which doesn't seem like it's viable yet, but we'll see. With that said, we have approximately a baker's dozen worth of honorable mentions, and then we have a standard list of 10. The standard disclaimer applies, as me and Kirk always say. We are not putting these in any particular order. It doesn't mean that one thing that we say first is more powerful than the other, or that we're going the opposite direction, or the last thing we say is the most powerful thing. These are just cards that we think might see play. Honorable mentions are generally cards that might see play in like one deck, or they're just cute and we wanted to talk about them, or something to that degree. The actual list is stuff that we think we'll see play either because it's a commander that we're going to see a lot of, or it's a card that's going to go in the 99 of several different commanders. There are some caveats or exceptions there where there might be a card where it's like this really only goes in this one commander, but it's a popular cEDH commander, so that makes it, kind of worthy of the list. And also it might have some fringe side cases where that can fit into, an alternate commander that's kind of on a similar trajectory, but isn't exactly the same. Also, keep in mind, like shit like bans in the past, losing out on Dockside Extortion or whatever, there are cards in this set that might benefit, like an Elsha or an Urza or a Joyra or something that was kind of left in the dust because it couldn't continuously be shitting out all these artifacts and then feeding a Dockside and just losing to it. So those decks have kind of come back around and are being played again, so there might be some new stuff that could benefit older lists that you haven't thought about in a while, and we might be able to point you in those directions. But usually me and Kirk kind of fly off the hinges and just, go back and forth, read off cards, and then we give our opinions. In this case, I've got all of the honorable mentions pulled up, so I'm going to read those off, and then when we get to the main list, Rev here is going to read those. But of course, we will have our commentary in between. So with that 8 minutes or so of introduction out of the way, let's get it cracking. The first thing, this probably could have went on the top 10, but I generally don't like putting lands on the top 10 because they're just kind of like a thing that everybody has access to, and it's not really taking too much brain power to realize that they're good. So with that in mind, there's a new cycle of Verges. The one I have pulled up here is just Bleachbone Verge. It is the Orzhov version. But basically, it's a land that will tap for one color. They're dual lands, I should say. But they will tap for one color, and then they will tap for the other color if you control one of the basic land types of those two colors. So in this case, Bleachbone Verge, it says tap, add black, tap, add white, activate only if you control a plains or a swamp. So you just basically have to have some basics in your land base, which a lot of decks are playing Tainted Pact and stuff, so that can sometimes be a consideration to where these aren't good. If you're on Tainted Pact, you're probably not playing the basics, so this may end up just being a thing that taps for black. Not that that's awful if you're in a two-color deck, but, who's playing Orzhov, really?
I mean, it also taps for the dual lands, the shock lands, and the surveil lands as well now. Because it's any swamp or any...
That is correct. So... I guess in that regard, I'm not misspeaking, but it is like the old way of thinking because, usually you would look at this and go, okay, I have to add those things. But you're correct. The surveil lands and a lot of other newer cards that have been printed have those basic land types, so you can be okay. It doesn't specify basic on the card, so that's good.
Yeah, notably these aren't basics, and they don't have land types, so you can't fetch them. That is a downside to them.
But, you get this on turn one, or you get this in your opening hand with any dual land or any fetch land, and you're like, yeah, this taps for two colors. That's great.
It doesn't feel bad to draw it either because, they don't come in tapped. Exactly. Which is important.
That is a huge boon to them, especially because some of those, like the surveil lands and others, come into play tapped, despite being fetchable. So like each of these cycles have their pros and cons, so to speak.
Yeah, I feel like it's not bad for any two-color deck to just throw it in there. We got what? Sunbillow, which is red-white?
I don't recall the entire cycle. I think it's like There was a cycle of these back in the day too. I think this might be the continuation of that, or the...
It's so the one that was previously was in Duskmourn House of Horrors. That was the allied colored clockward cycle. So it was the Flood Farm Verge, the Gloom Lake Verge. These are the enemy colored counterclockwise Verge lands. We're still missing our allied colored counterclockwise and our enemy colored counterclockwise.
But wasn't there some...
backward.
I feel like there was a cycle of these, like Tainted Isle or something. It was like back in the day.
That was Torment. That was it was similar. It was similar to that, but that was the Tainted ones, and then there was also Nimbus Maze and Future Sight.
But weren't the Tainted ones this same sort of thing, where it was like tap, pay the thing?
No, it was colorless tapped, or if you controlled a swamp, you could.
That's what it was. Okay,
for black, white.
Those are also decent, but worse because these are definitely an upgrade from those. But I thought that this was a continuation of that cycle. That's my fault.
I mean, I run Tainted Isles in Yuriko still, so.
Yeah, I mean it's not bad. I still run the one that's like checks for if you have 2 or less lands. I forget what it is.
And I run Gloom Lake Verge and Yuriko as well.
I mean, some of these ones might actually replace. I think these lands probably replace some of those older style lands if you are running them, like the Tainted Isles. You just swap it in if the colors are there. Again, like you said, the cycle isn't complete, but it looks
Gloom
like
Lake
we're gonna get
for it.
I feel like we're gonna get the rest of them.
I think Gloom Lake's probably which was the Duskmourn House Horror one.
Yeah,
Gloom Lake I think is probably the best of the cycle because it taps for blue. And then it taps for black if you control swamp or an island.
Just tapping for blue is busted, right?
you're in 2 colors. If you're in Dimir, I mean, you always want blue. You sometimes want black.
Right. That makes sense. So moving on to the next, this is a land that I picked out, and it's arguably not good, but it's also like I'm curious about it to see like where it might actually be good. It's Muragonda Raceway. It is all just basic land. It doesn't have any land typings. But it does have that new mechanic, Start Your Engines. So when it comes in, you get the 1 speed. And then each turn, if somebody loses a life, you gain the speed. So you get to max speed 4. It taps to add a colorless. And then if you're at max speed, it taps to add 2. Probably bad, again, like I say. It was just an interesting thing because it's like better than Temple of the False God, just on its face. Because Temple of the False God, which nobody's playing in cEDH anyway, but it used to be a thing that we all talked about because it came in like every precon. You're just like, this land sucks. Half the time it doesn't do anything. This at least comes down and taps for a colorless. So if you're in like a monocolored deck, you can afford to have this kind of land where it's just like a utility. And if it happens to stick around and you happen to do some damage, it might not be turn 4. If you were to drop this turn 1, it may not be turn 4 where you're getting the double mana. Maybe it's turn 5 or turn 6. But arguably, the average, I don't know. I might be biased. I'm not playing tournament Magic. We're not on the top end all the time on our channel. So, our average games are like turn 6 to turn 8 anyway. Because we all play in a way that we slow the game. Yeah, well, the meta slowed down, but we also played in a way where we slowed the meta down on purpose. So I can see this being a little bit of a boon. I hate to compare it to City of Traders, but like it's similar in the sense that like so City of Traders comes down early, it gives you the 2 mana, but then you have to sack it when you play another land. This could come down early, it provides 1 mana the whole time, and then at some point it may give you that bonus of 2 mana. And if you can afford the slot because you're in a monocolored deck, I don't see this as being a bad thing, but I also don't see it as being busted. It was just interesting enough for me to be like, I could see this in a deck. I just don't know which one.
I don't hate... I mean, we're not going to talk about these 2 cards in the honorable mentions of the list, but the deck I played last week, Mendicant Core, Guidelight, I can see it being used in him to just get the speed right away. I know we're not going to be talking about, I don't know how to pronounce this guy, Vintwex, the verbose host. It's the homunculus. He's 0.
Oh, right, yeah.
He also has the speed component.
Yeah, if you have Start Your Engines on anything in your deck that can further this along, I think this is a slam dunk, unless you're like 3+ colors. If you're in a 2-color deck that has anything that says Start Your Engines, yes. And I didn't even think about that when I put this in the list. That's a good point.
I don't know about who else plays this, but I mean, you fought against my Liberator deck. The Urza's Battlethopter.
Mm-hmm.
Easy slot in. He doesn't care about any colors. It taps for 2 colors in 4 turns. I'm not going to complain about putting that in the deck.
mean, ironically, I'm now a pilot of a colorless deck, but it's in Pauper. It's the Glaring Fleshraker that came out in Modern Horizons 3. It's you play a colorless spell. On the cast of that, you make an Eldrazi spawn, which is the colorless creature that sacks for a colorless. And the Fleshraker also says anytime a colorless creature enters the battlefield, it pings everyone for 1. So you play, anything, and you basically make a thing and you ping. But if it's a creature, you also ping for 2. This would slot right in, but it's unfortunately it's a rare. But yes, I would love to have this in that deck for sure. Anything that is color, I mean, that's probably the only colorless thing. I know back in the day, people used to play Kozilek Butcher of Truth. I don't know that anybody's playing that competitively anymore. It was a thing for a hot minute. I think up to 2 colors, you're probably fine. Like you said, the Mendicant Core, this could go in there. It would be fine because you're going to be pushing those counters up anyway. So it's going to give you that extra mana boost pretty quickly. Not super exciting, and that's why I left the lands in the honorable mentions. Moving forward, next one is what I thought was the best of this cycle, and it's a recurring cycle because in Kaladesh we did have a Gear Hulk cycle. I think Noxious Gear Hulk and maybe the red one were probably the best, but these ones are 2 color, and they're all kind of expensive, and I don't really see this being played in cEDH outside of the fact that it is kind of a pretty okay removal spell. If you could cheat this into play, perhaps with one of the cards that we're talking about later on, because it is an artifact, being able to cheat this into play might make it worth it. But Riptide Gear Hulk, it's a 2/5 artifact creature construct. It costs 1, 2 white, and 2 blue. So that mana cost is already Sphinx's Revelation. It's stupid. Who's casting this? Which again, unless you're cheating this in, is probably not cEDH viable. But I did like the rest of the text. So it's got double strike. It has prowess. So if you're able to cast some spells, it gets big. It's already a 2/5, so it's already hitting for 4. 1 spell makes it hit for 5. Or no, 6. Sorry. Anyhow.
6.
When this creature enters, for each opponent, put up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. That's kind of the, what's the one I play in Zur? Grasp of Fate. So it's similar. It's basically kind of like Grasp of Fate. That's the closest thing I can equate it to. Grasp of Fate is 3 mana in ETB. For each opponent, exile a target non-land permanent that player controls until it leaves the battlefield. The Gear Hulk isn't doing that exactly. Instead, it's putting it into their library 3rd from the top, which means they could potentially shuffle that problematic thing away, which is kind of nice. Just because, they get a fetch land on their draw, and they're just like, well, fuck it, I don't care about the thing anymore. I'm just going to fetch, and now it's gone. So it doubles as actual removal. I'm probably arguing into a wall here because it's way too much mana for what it does. But if you could cheat this in, and you can get rid of some problematic stuff to then try and win the game, pretty okay. But I don't know that it'll see any play.
We'll talk about this a bit later, but Asherton, Scarab's Fist, I think this card could be slotted into that. 3 mana, put it on the field.
Right. And that feels pretty okay because you get rid of a Dranith, of Dothy, and a Esper Sentinel all at once.
Kaikar, the new Kaikar, I could see be put in as well. Because, he's a, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can exile him and put him back onto the battlefield and just repeatedly do that.
I can see this also because it's already in Azorius. You can already be doing Displacer Kitten loops where you're flickering this and just putting everybody's shit back into their library. And then, it kind of makes Displacer Kitten into a Hullbreaker Horror, right? But you're hitting
better than a Hullbreaker.
Exactly, because you're hitting everything at once. So this, and now that we're talking about it, this is actually starting to feel better than I thought it was. I was just like, this is kind of cute. But being able to flicker this and do some loops with Kitten or Teferi, and this could be pretty busted. It's going to do the same thing as your Tyrant or whatever. Could also, I guess, be in those sort of polymorph decks where you could polymorph into this.
I'm thinking Shurikai as well for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to run too many creatures in Shurikai,
but just having an additional one that it's a board wipe essentially. It might get rid of those. things that are stopping you. Yeah. Okay, so I'm a little higher on this now that we talked. I didn't even
I still think
consider
it's
combo
in the honorable
potential.
mentions, but it's
For sure.
not terrible.
I actually went out as far as to say that I thought that this was the best one out of the series, but Kirk did bring another one up. Speaking of, I didn't mention it earlier, but Kirk did help us with the list and gave us some commentary and added some of the cards that we are going to talk about, and I will try to accentuate that when I can. But yeah, moving on. This next one, okay, so this is a card that's fully honorable mentions. I don't see where this is ever going to be played. I just wanted to talk about it because what the fuck? This is the Aetherspark. So it is a 4-mana legendary artifact planeswalker equipment. What? So, I mean, obviously, all planeswalkers are legendary, so the legendary part doesn't matter so much. And we've had legendary artifacts before. Okay, cool. We've had legendary equipments before, too. But not all piled onto the same thing. This is the weirdest card design I can think of right now, and it's not atrocious. I could see a world where like this works, but not in cEDH. This is definitely a casual card. But I just wanted to talk about it because of how ridiculous it is. It has, like most Planeswalkers designs are now. So it starts with 4 loyalty, and then has a blanket passive, and then it has some activated abilities. So as long as the Aetherspark is attached to a creature, it can't be attacked, and has whenever equipped creature deals combat damage during your turn, put that many loyalty counters on the Aetherspark. So that's kind of like the what's the blade? I put it on Tevish.
Luxior.
Yeah, Luxior. Yeah, so I built a Tevish deck with Arden just to be able to use Luxior, because I thought Tevish, as a big-ass beater that just keeps getting bigger and they can use his ult to steal everybody's stuff, pretty good, right? In theory, it was not that great of a deck, but it was a fun idea. And this is kind of essentially the same thing, because it did have that clause where like you got counters as it got combat damage and whatnot. So, and then its +1 is attach it to one target creature you control, put a 1/1 counter on that creature. So that's how you get to its passive, essentially. And then once you've started to build up a bunch of loyalty because you're attacking and hitting people with it, you can then neg-5 it to draw 2 cards, which really only takes one. I think one attack puts it to 6-ish.
Yep.
And then, yeah. So I mean, you're basically able to draw,
and then you put it to 6 with 1 attack or more.
Right, and then you can draw 2 cards. So like pretty quickly, you have a weird equipment planeswalker thing that draws you 2 cards for like 4 mana. That's not terrible. And then pushing forward, when you get to a high enough level, you can neg-10 it to add 10 mana of any one color, which could be the thing that sets you over the top to win the game. I don't know. I could see somebody trying to use this in competitive. I don't know. Maybe is this the way to bring Super Friends back?
You'll be seeing it competitive.
Yeah. You're going to be playing it?
I have them on my decks. Yep.
All right. Well, there you go. Stay tuned, I guess, for that video. You might see what it can do, or we might see that it doesn't do shit.
Or you might not see it because I don't draw it. I mean, right? That is an option.
There are some variables there. But yeah, it's just a weird, unique design. I like it because it does combine. I liked Luxior and how it kind of broke the Planeswalker into being a creature, and to where you could use its abilities to increase the loyalty and then use the loyalty without like killing it. It was a cool concept. I was really a big fan of Luxior, but it just didn't hit the way I thought it would. I'm interested to see what you do with this, for sure.
I'm throwing it in the my Boros deck, the Arden Jessica.
Okay.
I mean, he auto-equips it. If he has Colossus Hammer on him, he immediately gets 10, 11 counters on it. You can immediately make 10 mana.
That doesn't sound awful. Crazy card. Next up is a weird removal spell. I like it because it's cheap and it can hit quite a few targets. The only issue is that it's sorcery, and that's kind of why it's over here instead of being like maybe on the list. It's called Quack Feast. It's 1 and a black for a sorcery. Choose target creature, planeswalker, or vehicle, mill 2 cards, then destroy the chosen permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. Graveyard hate isn't too prevalent in cEDH currently. It exists, but like not a ton of people are, outside of like, you know, the Rests in Pieces and Dothy Voidwalkers, like not a whole lot of graveyard hate. So getting to a point where you could have, 4, 5, 6 creatures in the grave to have the ability to just blow up something really big, pretty cool. The mill can help along with that as well, but it being a sorcery, not as good as it could be. I really wish this was an instant. I think this would be a slam dunk in a lot of decks that do graveyard and or mill and or reanimator shenanigans where they're putting shit in their grave pretty constantly. Makes it a 2 mana, blow up pretty much anything on the board, even big threats like a Sphinx or whatever.
We also have to consider that vehicles are artifacts, and this is the first time you can really remove any sort of artifact with black. It's mono black.
That is true, because they do have Destroy Creature, and they do have like Hero's Downfall, which hits Planeswalkers. No,
it's going to be niche when it comes up, but
yeah, that's the issue. Is that like I was hoping that there was going to be more vehicles in this set that might have been cEDH viable, and I don't really think that they made that. So this is probably more of a casual card, but it is interesting that you can hit larger creatures with it.
The only other card I think that can destroy any type of artifact in black is Gate to Phyrexia from Antiquities. So
moving on, this one I put it on the honorable mentions because it's obviously not like top tier, but I really like it. So it's called Broadside Barrage. It's 1, a blue and a red. So it's an instant, and it says it deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Draw a card, then discard a card. So 3 mana generally... Alright, so if you go by like red's damage scale, 1 mana, 3 damage, right? That was the thing with Lightning Bolt. And then it was like, okay, everything else has been fixed, so then it ended up becoming like 1 or 2 mana to do 3 damage, or 1 mana to do 2 damage, and yada yada yada. They have a lot of cards that do 4 damage. There are cards that also do, I think it's like Heated Axe or some Axe, and there's a couple that do 5.
Does Lava Axe do it?
Lava Axe, I think is the 5. A lot of those see play in other formats too. They don't see play in cEDH. I think the general rule of thumb in cEDH is like 4 is basically the max you need to worry about most of the time, because it was always to hit Crom and then anything else that might be in that sort of range. Hitting for 5, though, hits Tivits and other things, although some of them may have ward and you might have to pay extra and whatever, but it does hit some of the bigger targets. But it still doesn't hit Consecrated Sphinx, it still doesn't hit the Hullbreaker Horrors and the Tidespout Tyrants. There's a lot of stuff it doesn't hit. I just wanted to highlight this because it's not overly costed. It does 5 damage, which is kind of a lot. Just getting the extra... draw a card, discard a card, the selection for 3 mana. A lot of times you pay 3 mana just to get that selection. So it's not awful, but it's obviously not seeing play in everything. So that's why we put it in the honorable mentions.
Next one is Racer's Scoreboard.
This is another one that has the start your engines mechanic. I only brought this one up because it's kind of I feel like because of Dockside being banned and certain decks that used to flourish, example, Elsha, Joyra, Urza to a lesser extent, because Urza still didn't really go away, but a lot of those decks that fed Docksides kind of fell out of favor because they were feeding Docksides, and those Docksides are winning off the backs of those players. So they stopped playing those decks. And Dockside being gone, this is a card that does something similar to what Elsha and Joyra and yada yada wants. It's a 4 mana artifact. It has the start your engines mechanic, so obviously comes in with the 1. If you do the loss of life thing, you get to max speed, is 4. Off the bat, when it ETBs, you draw 2 cards and discard a card. 4 mana for that effect is not great, because you can also be on like Frantic Search, which is 3 mana, draw 2, discard 2, but then you untap the lands, much better. Obviously, there's other cards that do similar things that are probably better as well, but it does have, at the max speed, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And that's just spells in general, and it's just you. So that can be that cost reducer for Elsha or Joyra, or anybody that's playing Bolas' Citadel decks with top, being able to filter through and do the top deck manipulation and all that stuff for basically free is worth it. And if you play this on an early turn, like say you got a gemstone, so then turn 1 you drop a land, then drop a soul ring, turn 2 you can tap and play this. By turn 5, this is reducing the cost of all your spells. That might be enough to push you over the edge. But pretty much in those kinds of decks.
Spells, though, at max speed. That's the only downside.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's probably not going to be until turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 that you're going to get that benefit. But it does not. It's not just put it into play and wait for that to happen. It's also drawing you some cards when you play it. So sometimes that might be the thing that you need. And I've learned this from playing a lot of Pauper competitively, that sometimes the cantrips are more important than the rest of it. But if your rest of it is worth it, then you're getting the cantrip and the bonus later. The problem is that it's 4 mana. I wish it was like 3.
Islane, I can see this being useful in a Mechadent core list if you can make them cEDH, because 5 mana, you got 2 of them. You're probably already at max speed.
Right.
Samut, the driving force, if you're at max speed, this is free to cast.
Mm-hmm. Basically, the arguments we made about that land earlier, that anything that's already increasing your max speed, this becomes better. So if you are on a deck that actually cares about that mechanic, you're now playing this for 4 to draw 2 and discard a card. And then maybe within a turn, you're already reducing the spell or the cost of all the rest of your spells, which it's not anything. Speed. It's creatures, it's instants, it's sorceries, enchantments, it's everything, which is also really relevant because it's not just reducing the cost of artifacts, which that's what the Elshas and the things of the world that I was bringing up cared about. Whereas this is just anything. So whatever you cast, it's just cheaper.
I feel like this would be the best in Samut, the Driving Force, the new Samut. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you'll ever see play the commander itself, but the fact that if you have max speed with Samut on the field, everything is just 4 less. Sorry, non-creatures are just 4 less.
If you can make 2-3 copies of this, because there are redundancies where you can make extra copies, like
Twinning Staff.
I mean, it becomes where like you're essentially just casting everything for free, or at least just the colored pips, which that's.
I mean, I was getting off in that game, 4 Soul Rings in one turn?
I think you got. I think it was 3. It was copies of 3. It was 3 Soul Rings, and then you had 3 of this, 3 of that, because you had a Twinning Staff and your commander out, and were able to cast the things with the extra. It was stupid. Ultimately, you didn't win, which was unfortunate. But your board was like, what the fuck? And all it needs is all that meant to me was that your deck just needed a little bit of honing, and it was built the night before we played, so I did not spend a lot of time on it. Honestly, I didn't mind either, and it is what it is. But so moving on to the next one, still in the honorable mentions.
The next one is Monument to Endurance. It's a 3 mana artifact. Whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Draw a card, create a treasure. Each opponent loses 3. While this is going to be a very niche card, I can see it being used in Tiny Bones. I, once again, play Tiny Bones. You're forcing a lot of discards. You're also discarding because it's a lot of global discards. If you're drawing from it, if you're creating a treasure token, if you're causing loss of life, I mean, it's just it's an extra little bit that you can just put in there, and it helps smooth out some stuff, especially with the drawing a card once a turn.
I see it with Tiny Bones in particular. This is definitely, this is spot on. I don't play a lot of lists that discard cards on purpose, but it doesn't mean that you don't, incidentally discard cards. So, this could literally go into any deck. It's just a matter of finding out if you discard a lot or not. If you're doing any sort of cycling, land cycling, Lorien Revealed, any of that kind of stuff, this could draw you a card on top of those kinds of things because you're discarding the card. So
which deck is that does a lot of? Is it Shabraz and
Brawl and Shabraz does some discard stuff. If you're running Glinthorn or any of those things, you can potentially be getting extra value off of those. But usually when you play Glinthorn, you're winning the game. And usually with Brawl and Shabraz, same thing. If you're on Shabraz on Brawlin and you've got your other combo pieces, you're just winning the game. You can even Gitrog. Gitrog has stuff where it's he has discard outlets and you just discard a card to draw a card. Easy, right?
Anjay Falconwreath. I know Anjay hasn't played all that much. Her whole thing is about discard and madness.
Yeah,
you're drawing an extra card off of that once at least.
I could definitely see the slot in there.
Otherwise, I don't know if there's actually a cEDH deck with it, but I'm not going to try to pronounce the Asmon blah 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 super long name one. The one with the cookbook. I can't.
Yeah. I don't even remember what she did. I don't think anybody ever actually played her either, but
I don't think so. But
yeah, I mean, this is neutral and generic enough to where it could go into literally any deck. It's just a matter of finding your ratio, basically. Like, how many cards am I actually discarding? I want to say even Transmute is a discard.
Transmute, I don't think is discard, is it?
No. I'm not sure.
Let me look it up real quick. Discard. Yep, it's a discard.
There you go. So if you're on some transmute effects, you're on some discard effects, you're on some cycling effects, anything like that, I think you run this. If you're on a lot of looting effects too, like your faithless lootings and your tormented voices and all of those, there's a fuck ton of those now. If you're on a mono red deck, this probably goes in for sure because you're just gonna discard. You're gonna draw 2, discard 2, and then draw another one. Or you're making a treasure, or you're pinging people.
Is it once a turn for each of the effects?
Right.
Which does... It's not the greatest, but...
But you get options.
You have an extra slot. If you have an extra slot, I'd do it. I'd throw it in there.
Yeah, I mean, because like drawing a card for discarding a card is always good. And then, even if you can't do that, making a treasure, you got another mana, now you can do another action, or draining the table. I think the draining the table part is low-key probably the best, because if you can do that every turn, you're just making everybody drain. If you're doing that in conjunction with, like, pingers and other things, if you're doing Glinthorn type stuff, like, you're just lowering the table's life total, and then you can get to a finisher. I think this card is pretty good, but it's also kind of situational, and that's why it's why
I like in Tiny Bones, though, right? Tiny Bones is all about making sure you don't have cards in hand, drain your life away. This just speeds up the process.
Right. I really wish that this was not a rare, because I have several popper lists that this would just fucking slam dunk in.
I wish it was 2 CMC instead.
All right, this is another one that was yours as well. This is Veteran Beast Rider. I saw it. I didn't add it because it feels like it's very niche as well, but it's a 1 and Selesnya, green and a white. It's a creature human knight. It's a 3/4, which is actually a great body for 3 mana. And it says at the beginning of your end step, untap each creature you control. So it's already kind of like a weird half Seedborn Muse thing. But then also has an infinite mana outlet to where for 2 and a green and a white, creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. No taps, no nothing. So infinite mana, you can infinitely pump the team. So could be a finisher. Also just gives you those, if you have things that are untapping stuff, or just creatures that make mana or whatever, which you're going to have in these colors, and tapping them every turn, not bad. Not untapping the rest of your lands and shit. Seedborn is still better, but as an additional piece, or if it's a creature-heavy deck that is more about wanting to untap the creatures and not the rest of the board, this is pretty good.
I want to talk to Joey about this one, because I could see use for it in Captain Sisse.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if, with Joey's list, if there's a space to cut for that.
I don't know either, but I can also see why you would want to tutor with Sisse every turn.
Twice every turn?
Yeah. Just stupid. I feel like you're probably right. I think that's the deck where it goes. So I could probably make an argument for this to be in Sithis, because you can make infinite mana. So this could be an additional, like, Finale of Devastation type card, where it's just if you got to infinite mana, you can do this. Also, she runs a lot of dorks, so untapping them every turn to have mana to interact, not terrible. Mm-hmm. I just convinced myself I might put this into this. I'm at least going to put it on the considering. Selesnya one with Parlay. Being able to parlay every turn, that actually could be good too. And it's only 3 mana, so it's not like it's super prohibitively costed. And 3 mana for a 3/4, and then having the ability to, make an infinite mana of some sort, and then having an outlet. That's not terrible. Next up, this is one of yours. You can read this one off, because I was not excited about this one at all, but you were.
I'm super excited for this one, but once again, it's specifically for my Boros deck. It's Adaptive Omni Tool. It's 2 colorless. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control, which is huge in Arden if you're running a lot of equipment like I am. And then whenever equipped creature attacks, look at the top 6. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. Once again, you're looking for a crap ton of equipment for Arden. So I think it's great in it. He equips for 3, but Arden equips it for free.
Right.
I'm not going to say anything bad about a free equip in Arden with.
Yeah, I mean, considering you're going to have a bunch of equipment out too, so like it's going to make whatever you equip it to huge. Outside of any deck that cares about equipments, looking for any artifact is kind of okay, but it's just digging and it's not really like getting there. I think one of the other cards that we have on the list later on is actually better if you just care about artifacts. This is definitely an equipment thing, but there are some Arden stands out there.
The big thing I'm excited for with this lane is the once in a 20 games that I get this off and flip over a Embercleave and immediately attach it to him.
Like I said, I've known some Arden stands. Like there's Hipster Stacks with Cicada made popular, and then God, what's his name from the Mind Sculptors? Cal, also a Arden stand, played like Arden Crom and a few different variants, and it enjoys that. It's kind of where I got the inspiration to do the Arden Tevesh thing with the Luxior. And then you can also, once you have Luxior on it, you can suit it up with more and, kind of go crazy. But
it does work really well with Sigardia's Aid.
Yeah.
Because your equipment has flash at that point, so you can just throw shit on, but or throw it on the field. I guess you can't equip it. That's downside.
There's the other Pure Steel Paladin, allows you to do the equip thing for free, and there's a lot of different ways you can make those things work. Well, the magnetic one isn't that Godo? That's like a red card.
Oh, this is the other thing. Other deck I throw it in is Godo. You can get all your artifacts out or into your hand at least. Godo does have an issue of finding cards that they need. It can find you Helm of the Host.
Yeah, it can just find you the rocks you need to get to 13, right? So,
and find you Hammer Nizan, so you can protect Godo. Right. I mean, it's utility in Godo. I think I don't know how much people are playing Godo these days.
I haven't seen Godo in ages, but I also haven't seen Arden in ages. So, relatively competitive commanders that have been around in the last, 5 years plus. So, and when we look at these cards, we do consider things from our history as far as like knowing what was competitive at one point. So, this next one was brought up by Kirk, but it is also something I looked at and went like, I don't think this is good enough, but I can see a world where maybe you can break this, and I just am not willing to put the brain power in to figure it out. It's Radiant Lotus. It's a 6 mana artifact. It says tap, sacrifice one or more artifacts, choose a color. Target player adds 3 mana of the chosen color for each artifact sacrificed this way. So you can tap this, choose yourself, choose blue, sack 2 artifacts, make 6 blue. Pretty busted. Yeah, that's a lot of mana. But this is also a 6 mana investment, and you have to blow up 2 of your other artifacts. Now, granted, if you're making treasures and shit, or foods, or any other sort of tokens that you don't give a shit about, sacking those, making a bunch of mana, perfect, great. If you have stuff like the keys, voltaic keys, and some of the other things where you can untap this and then do it again, even better. In a Storm deck, that could be great. But the initial 6 mana investment just to get to the point where you can then have that option feels way too slow to me, and that's why I skipped over this one, but I can recognize where it could be busted.
Magda can get it for free.
Sure. Yeah.
And she's probably creating a decent amount of artifacts.
Sure. And that's, being able to sack the treasures to make, sack 2 treasures, 3 yeah, exactly. Yes. And probably a Magda card for
Radiant Lotus sacks itself too. If I'm reading the one or more artifacts, it doesn't say other artifacts, so it can sack itself to make 3.
Yes. Which is, I think, the point is that it's a Lotus, so it sacks for 3, which is like Gilded Lotus or Jeweled Lotus, yada, yada, yada.
You never want to do it by itself.
You don't, but in a pinch, it could be a thing that you cheat out and then, with whatever. I can't think of something off the top of my head.
I'm personally just thinking you're cheating out with Magda.
Right. This is probably a Magda card. Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that this is a Magda card, and it doesn't really go
what's that one card? Something assembler, factory assembler or something. The one that whenever you create a treasure, you create a food and clue.
Something like that.
Something like that. If you have that in Magda and you're making all these extra foods and clues,
yes,
you pop this out. You're sacking all those extra foods and clues.
I saw that played too in like Chatterfang, because Chatterfang just also makes additional tokens. So like having that in there to make the additional tokens, and then having something like this to make just a bunch of mana could be cool. It just feels slow. It's a lot of mana. It's fine, but I don't think I'm going to be putting it in any list personally.
No. I think it'd be a backup for Magda if someone wants to run in Magda.
If they can find a slot too, which might be difficult.
It's a pretty lean deck.
Yeah. Next one up is actually one that I missed. Truth be told, I dug through the mythics and the rares, and once I got to uncommons, I was kind of like over it. So I didn't dig too deep into the uncommons and commons, but spoilers, I may be recording a set review for Pauper, competitive Pauper specifically, which will cover more about the uncommons and the commons. But I'm actually kind of high on this. It's Diversion Unit. It's 1 in a blue. It's a 2/1 flyer, artifact creature robot. It has pay 1, sack it, counter target instant source spell unless its controller pays 3. So it's very much like the Spellstutter Shrine and Hermit, and
it's like Malevolent Hermit. I think it's a worse version of it.
It's similar to several different creatures. There's the pirate. It's like Siren Storm Tamer, I believe, and there's several cards that are like this that have they're a body that can be sacked to counter a spell. And in this regard, I like it because it comes down. It's a 2/1 flyer, so you're able to ping people or block something that like might come your way, and then also have the clause of just being able to counter something. Because this comes down so early in the game and it only costs 1 to counter the spell, it can be handy in like counterspell wars or other things and whatnot. So I'm higher on it now that it's been pointed out to me, but again, it's not something that's going to see play in every deck. If you're in that kind of thing, that kind of deck that wants just all the counterspells that you can get, there are a number of blue decks out there that just want every counterspell effect that they can have, and this could be that. Having it on the board to have it as an option whenever you want is kind of fun, although it is in their face, so they know it's there and they can play around it, but some people will just play into it to get rid of it, and sometimes that gets rid of, a card that you don't want to deal with. So next one, we're getting here close to the end of these honorable mentions, but it's another one that was mentioned by Kirk. This is Adrenaline Jockey. It's a 2 in a red for a creature Minotaur pilot. It's a 3/3. Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, this creature deals 4 damage to them. Whenever you activate an exhaust ability, you put a 1 counter on this creature. That part probably doesn't ever matter. This feels to me very much like the Razorkin thing from Duskborn, which was like anytime an opponent draws a card, it deals damage. This is just another stacks piece in red. And I'm liking that they're giving these stacks pieces to other colors, because now shit like Boros, like Winota, and whatever that's already a Staxy list that really depended on almost solely white for these stacks pieces is now getting A, a creature that's not a human, so it triggers Winota, but B, a creature that actually comes in and does stuff, because this on the board, you play a spell, you play a counter spell, you play a thing, an instant, whatever, anything on someone else's turn, you just take 4 damage. So it's just kind of a thing that sits on the board, does some damage incidentally here and there. Is it going to see play in every list? No. But if you're in a Staxy deck that it has red, most likely going to be Boros. This fits right in. I like this for Winota.
Consideration.
Yeah.
For Mogus.
Yeah, I can see it there too, for sure, because you are all about stacking all of those incidental damage
triggers.
Yep. I think that's really all there is to say about it. Next one is another Kirk suggestion. It's Ret Tomb Mystic. It's 1 in a blue for a zombie bird wizard, 2/1 with flying, and it says each creature card in your hand has cycling, 1 in a blue. Interesting, because just being able to give everything cycling is pretty good. If you have a creature in your hand that's like way more mana than you can afford, or just not useful for the current situation, you can get rid of it and you can draw a card. Notably, he mentioned that this could enable some Reanimator shenanigans, that anytime you get that Broodlord in your hand, because you drew it and you're like, fuck, I don't want this, it needs to be in the grave, you can cycle it away so it is in the grave, and then you can, tutor for your Reanimate or whatever and do the thing. I don't know that there's really anything else to say about this one either.
And then our last one in the honorable mentions is Ovia Automech Artist. 3 in a green legendary human artificer. Each creature that's attacking one of your opponents has trample. Notably, it's a 1/2. This thing ain't trampling over anything. Also notable, this is almost like a world effect. It's any creature that is attacking your opponents, even your opponent's creatures attacking.
I like to think of it as an Aetherdrift effect, so it's kind of incentivizing people to not attack you and attack other people because now their creatures have trample. I like that. For me, it really is literally an Elvish Piper with upside, because Elvish Piper costs 3 and a green, and it only has the text green tap. You may put a creature from your hand onto the battlefield. This also adds could be a vehicle, and if it is a vehicle, you get 2/1/1 counters on it, and then you also have this Aetherdrift effect. So for me, if you're playing Elvish,
not just a vehicle, because artifact creatures count as well.
True. I didn't even think about that. So yeah, even more upside. If you're playing Elvish Piper in a cEDH list, this is an automatic huge upgrade. Even if you're not playing vehicles or artifact creatures, just having that clause that trample goes over. Now, the only downside is that Kirk brought up is that it does help out like the Timnas of the world, where like those sorts of creatures are getting trample, so they may get through to give them card draw. That sucks, but you're also not getting attacked, so maybe that's good for you. Really, it's kind of hit or miss, but I think if you're playing Piper, this is just better. But then again,
I see not a upside to this over Piper as well.
What's that?
I don't know if you saw it. But since it's artifacts get +1 or 2+1 counters, it's great for Triskelion and it's great for Walking Ballista because it can't be countered. It's put directly on the battlefield.
Yes.
Putting Walking Ballista with 2 counters on it directly onto the battlefield.
Right. So maybe you need to be in
give it lifelink somehow.
Selesnya or Golgari for that to matter, because you either need your Heliod or you need your what's his name? Yeah. For that to matter. But yes, if you're playing Piper, this is an automatic upgrade. You should be playing this instead. If you're not playing Piper, which probably most people aren't, but I feel like I've had it in the cEDH list at some point or another. I don't think I do currently. I'm definitely running Piper in casual decks. So this may be more of a casual leaning card, but I wanted to bring it up because I literally saw the 1/1 with Piper, and it was like, this is just better. So why would you play Piper instead of this? Same CMC, does more. Play it. Mm-hmm. It's Powercraft. That's really all there is to it.
All right, should we get to our actual top 10?
We should, because we are way farther on time than I thought. But hey, there's less of these than there were those, and, well, let's talk about them. What's
all first? Right, first one is Hashton Scarab's Fist. We saw, it was Joey playing this?
Yes.
Joey played this last week. It is 1 and a black, and it is in the color identity of Esper. Whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2 and a blue. If you do, create a tapped token that has a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. That's a lot of things you can cheat out.
And honestly, on its face, like when I first saw this card, I was like unimpressed. Granted, Esper now, because of the nerf with Dockside and whatnot, to red, Esper has come up a lot. I felt that was there in other Esper decks that I've played. I wouldn't say it's better than Grixis, but it's kind of comparable now. 4-color is still probably better, but
I mean, I digress. Look at all the cards you can put onto the field as 4/4s. Hoarding Broodlord.
Consecrated Sphinx.
Clon Sphinx, that's the one I was thinking about. Amazing. Anything that you really want to cheat out colors. Yeah.
Villas.
That new
Nezahal.
The Vegavoth.
What we saw was Jin-Gitaxias. There's 2 versions, both probably viable. Literally anything that's like, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8 CMC. These are cards that you're going to put in there that are going to be win cons. That this is just going to say, oh, I discarded that. I'm going to pay 3. And I'm going to put it on the field. It's a 4/4, so like they do lose their power toughness, and they lose some of what they are.
Such powerful effects, though, right?
But almost all of them, all the ones that we've mentioned, do not have tap effects, so them coming into play tap doesn't matter. They're 4/4s, that doesn't matter. They have their abilities. You have to find
a way to discard it.
That's the only issue. Yeah. So things like Tortured Existence are obviously a shoe-in. Things that are loot effects, which you're going to get in blue, those are going to be great for you.
Did we finally find the one use of One with Nothing?
Remind
just discard the entire hand?
Oh,
One black, discard your
right,
hand.
yeah. I mean, yes, I can see that actually being playable in this deck. You know, just being in blue, that there are so many catch-up card draw mechanics that you could literally play that, discard your hand, reanimate a bunch of shit, and then just be like, well, I'm sitting on a Ristic, so I don't care. I'm gonna refill my hand.
Yeah. You're in blue. I mean, you're going to be discarding at the end of your turn probably if you have more than 7 cards. There's that instant speed.
Oh, and outside of like breach combos, you have access to everything. You've got Thassa's Oracle and Consultation or Chain Effect. You have access to Bomberman. You have access to Broodlord. You have access to fucking Francisco loops if you want. You have Walking Ballista, Heliod. Yeah, I mean, there's
I know
the
you don't like
Micaeus
playing
loops.
this lane, but the wheel effects that make you discard. Yeah,
I think this is a place. Time Twister, not so much, but your Windfall is definitely a card you probably play.
There's the black wheel. I can't remember.
Yeah, the one that makes you you
discard
draw one less. That also is probably fine here because you're affecting your opponent's hands. Yeah, there's a lot of options here. All of the good Esper combos. You can run Necro, you can run Ad Naus, you can do a number of different things with this. And
not Necro though. You discard into exile, right?
Yes. My point was that you don't really care if you're doing Necro things. You don't really care about that part of the card. I was just generically saying that Esper stuff works. But yeah, you probably don't play Necro on this.
Just reading this, though, it says whenever you discard a card, it doesn't care if it goes to exile.
That is true. This is probably the best cEDH commanders out of the set.
Easily one of the top 2.
Yeah, for sure. Next up.
Count on Luck. Red. Triple pip, but that's not so bad. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Hello, Prosper.
Yeah.
I think you wrote that down.
Yeah, this is one of my picks, and that's immediately where I thought of it because Prosper has the whole clause. If you exile a thing, you cast the thing from exile, you get the treasure.
Any mono red deck can use this.
Literally, any mono red deck likes this because it's just card advantage, and 3 mana doesn't matter to them. 3 red pips in a dual color with like Prosper. It's a little harder because it is 3 pips, but it's not that hard to do. I don't care. The only
downside I see to this is Drannith, but
yes,
you're going to run into Drannith when you run into Drannith, and you can't help that.
Yeah, I feel like this could be run in any mono red deck. It could probably be run in most 2-color red decks. Anything beyond that, no. But I think this will see play in more than just Prosper. The Obnix might like it. There was the one from... it's not a good card, really, but they're just another example. It was in the Doctor Who set. It was the Araxis from Mars or whatever the fuck. It's like anytime you cast a card from exile, you get a 1/1 or a 2/1 or something token. I've been looking for cards because it's an uncommon. I built it for Pauper. But we need more cards like this to be able to enable it to be really good. It's not quite there, but there are...
Too bad this is a rare for Pauper. But
right. But if you played that in casual as your commander, because it is still a legendary creature, I believe, you could have this as a way to help with that. But either way, a little bit of card advantage. It's not great, but it is, I think, going to see play in more than one list. So that's why it
reminds me of a Phyrexian Arena in red.
Right. And then, that's what red does. It's impulse draw. So
yeah, and red never complains about getting an extra card in hand when they can. The next one is Howl Squad Heavy. It's 2 generic, 1 red. It's a Goblin Mercenary. Hello, goblins. A 2/3. The text reads, "Start your engines." We've already gone over the start your engines mechanic, but it's each round you have it on the field. If an opponent lost life during your turn, you get 1 more point on the engine.
And when you get to 4, you have max speed.
Yeah, and you start with 1. Other goblins you control have haste. I think that is the major upside to this card. Yep. I think it can be used in... Well, we'll get to that in a second. It has other text, because Magic cards have a lot of text nowadays.
Yep.
At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. That token attacks if it's able. Sure, whatever, we don't care about. Max speed, though. Tap, add red for each goblin you control. I love this in Muxus.
So that's that's an obvious place, and that's a card that has seen some cEDH play. I love this. I love this card top to bottom. This is great in casual for Krenkos and Muxuses and other goblin heavy decks. But this is also great in, I would say, arguably Winota decks and Tymna decks that have red. So I personally play Tymna Rog. I know Tymna Jessica is also a thing, but getting this out early and then swinging with, that little 1/1 to get a Tymna draw is great. And if you can manage to create a number of goblins, you're now having a ritual later on in the game, which is great. Yeah. Also, any other goblin you happen to be playing, like, I don't know, Impulsive Pilferer and other stuff like that have seen some cEDH play. But if you're in any deck that's playing Snoop Combo, this is just an additional piece that is tutorable by Goblin Matron or Goblin Recruiter. It's a haste enabler as well, so it can replace in the Goblin pile the Torch Courier, because it just gives it blanketly instead of having to be sacked. And so in case you get stopped, you have it again for the next try. So yeah, tutorable, adds haste to all of your goblins, and makes tokens. So like I said, with Winota, if this attacks and then makes a goblin, like, you get 2 Winota triggers right off the first turn it comes down, it gives you the 1 trigger off the goblin. Second turn, it gives you 2 triggers, and that's just
it gives you 2 triggers because it's other goblins, it's not itself.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. But then later turns, if you have 2-3 goblins, like I said, even if you only have this guy, he still taps for a mana if you need it. Yep. It's one of my favorite cards out of the set, to be honest, but I know it's not the most powerful thing, but it is a very pushed goblin, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. The next card we have up is Repurposing Bay. 2
I'm high on this one, artifact. Too.
Pay 2, tap, sacrifice another artifact. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. Put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery.
Birthing what is this? Exactly. This is a second birthing pod for artifacts, the other being Oswald. Oswald was the original, but that was in white, which was arguably awful. In blue, this is doing everything you want it to do, for the most part. If you're in a Azorius deck, then you have access to 2. So, yeah, you can find some combo pieces here.
I think a big upside to this is if you add it in to a deck that's already running Dramatic Reversal Scepter combo.
Elaborate?
Just with the infinite mana and infinite untaps, you can keep pulling cards out that you need to the point where you pull out something like Aetherflux. If you're in 2-color, you're pulling out Bolus of Citadel.
Right, it can get you to where you want to go to. And pretty much anybody I've seen that's already reviewed this card prior to us has already been like, this is one of the
I'm rating this pretty high. This is probably my top 5 easy.
The birthing pod effect has already been proven to find a chain of things, and I don't think anybody's put it down on paper yet, or at least I haven't seen it, but this is going to be one of those chains, for sure. Somebody's going to find the chain that just does the thing that gets in there. And I'm actually going to change what the next card is, because it literally relates to this, because you just said the dramatic thing. It's Unstoppable Plan. You want to read that one off?
Yep. Unstoppable Plan is 2 and a blue enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all non-land permanents you control.
So this is kind of a weird thing where it's not Dramatic Reversal, because Dramatic Reversal is obviously an instant and it just immediately untaps your stuff. Yeah. This, however, is a permanent. This is basically a kind of an unwinding clock, but it's non-land permanent, so it's not just artifacts. So it's like with this unwinding clock, Dramatic Reversal, and Isochron Scepter, and the blue birthing pod for artifacts. Yeah. All of these things together kind of create a soup that can be pretty busted. I think Unstoppable Plan is not the best version of what this is doing, but I still feel like it's a very powerful card and a very powerful effect, and it's something that you can just drop innocuously and just untap stuff. It's
also an enchantment.
It's Seaborn Muse.
It's hard to remove in cEDH.
That too.
Not a lot of people run enchantment removal. I can see this being run in a Shurkai deck.
For sure.
You get an extra Shurikai activation off of it at the end of your turn, or on an opponent's turn if you want. You don't have to hold them up.
It does only untap on your end step, so it's not everybody's end step. So usually I see this being as something where like you have to have like so there's Emergent Zone, and then there's like the white Gandalf, there's your artifact command, the Battlethopter, there's Born Upon a Wind, and then there's the Valley Flood Color, I believe it is. That recently was printed. So like you have all of these different flash effects if you're in blue mostly, but then a couple splashes. And if you're already on that, you can it's almost like having a Final Fortune in non-red, because you can essentially do all your things and then move to end step, have everything untap, cast the thing for flash, and then do everything that you want to do and potentially win the game before you have to actually pass. And I think that's what makes this good. I
could also see this being a maybe card in Kinnan. You can tap out on your turn with Kinnan, and then at the very end of your turn, you're going to untap everything that's creatures, and artifacts, which Kinnan's going to have a whole bunch of to make all that extra mana, and then you have shields up for the opponent's turn.
Yeah, I agree. And even just in that sense, any mono blue, any blue Simic, whatever, any blue X deck. I probably not when you get into 3, 4, 5 colors, but like blue and blue X. Being able to tap out to do whatever the fuck you want, and then have the ability to untap everything so that you have mana up for answers is always good. It's very similar to like Karametra and other draw go decks, the rafts and whatever that allowed you to do stuff on everybody else's turn or untap or bank mana or whatever the case may be. This is kind of adding to that plan. So if you're already on a plan like that, this is more. And if you're not on a plan like this might be the card that can put you on that plan.
I'm also considering putting it in my Johan Apprentice Sorcerer deck.
Yeah, I can see it there.
Just because you can cast off the top of your library at any time, having that extra mana.
Yeah, you untap everything after you've already done everything that you were going to do your turn, and you're like, I'm done. I'll untap with you. It really feels to me mostly like Unwinding Clock, even though it's not the same. It's kind of that for every other deck that doesn't care about artifacts.
Maybe see it in Urza, not sure.
I can see it in Urza for sure. Because it's a permanent on the board that just untaps your stuff, including your constructs and stuff that you're normally just tapping down for mana, and now they're up for being blockers. Like there's so many variables that can.
It allows you to attack with your constructs as well if you want to, and untap them so you have the mana.
Right. So you use them for mana, or you attack with them, and either way, it's very.
And they're going to be big. They're going to be big in Urza, and you're probably going to be fighting someone who's in black who uses their life. Good to throw it in someone, untap it, so you have the mana for casting something else on your opponent's turn before they can try to win. I like it at its cost. 3 mana is not bad for it.
I think it's fine. Because the 2 mana effect for Dramatic Reversal being an instant, it's only one time. In this case, it being, the 1 extra mana and it's permanent is pretty good.
Turn, yeah.
And it's not like a dress down where it's like it comes in, it does the fuck you thing, and then it goes away. This stays.
Next one up on our list is Skyseer's Chariot. 1 in a white artifact vehicle, 3/3, flying. As this vehicle enters, choose an online card name. Activate abilities of the sources with the chosen name. Cost 2 more to activate. It has crew 2. We don't care about crewing it, I don't think.
I'm high on this because it's another Pithing Needle. And Pithing Needles, there's only like 2 of them that are like kind of pure, just artifacts, whatever. It's Pithing Needle and the Phyrexian Revoker, kind of like the standard. This is the same thing because it costs 2, and it's a vehicle, but who cares? Again, who cares what the crew costs? It's just, it comes in for 2 mana, you choose an online card name, and that thing costs more. It isn't as good as Pithing Needle or etc. because it doesn't stop it from being done at all. But it also has the upside of it's a vehicle. And for crew 2, Timna can crew this, and now she has flying, and she gets through, and she, draws you a card. Yep. Anything else in a Timna deck can crew this. I feel like this goes in a Timna deck, because it's just an incidental, easy thing to crew to get your card draw. Still
a heavily stacks version of Shurikai, the ones that run Humility, because it doesn't have to target a creature, it can target any non-land permanent.
This could also make Thrasios activations cost 2 more. which is not terrible.
Kinnan activations. More.
Kinnan, no, Shortcut does.
Shortcut does have activate.
I was thinking of Tibbet. There are plenty of commanders that are cEDH viable that have activated abilities.
Is activating a Planeswalker an activated ability?
I think so, but Judge
makes it cost 2 mana plus.
Judge.
Let me double check. Planeswalkers have activated abilities. Yes. So you see that random. What was his name? He's the mono black partner. No, Tevesh.
Yeah.
Throws down. Make Tevesh cost an additional 2 to activate any of his abilities. Why not?
Fucking.
I'm sure you'll find something in your opponent's deck that has an activated ability that you want to cost 2 more if you're playing stacks.
I agree, and I think that's where it goes. But like I said, it's also a Tymna enabler as far as being able to get through to draw cards. Yep. Jessica Planeswalker too, that's something you might want to make cost more because she keeps wiping your board when you're playing Tymna. So
I'm sure you'll find a use for it if you're running a stacks deck for this.
I guess I should say or clarify that I misspoke. It is not a Pithing Needle. I misread it. I read the whole choose a non-land card name, and I was like, oh, this is a Pithing Needle, and I didn't continue to read it. So that's my bad.
This is more like a... there's another mono white card that does something similar.
It's like
a containment field or something.
Yeah, you're right. There is a white card that does the same thing, but I just like the fact that it's 2 mana, and it just hitting a Kinnan. That in a tournament setting, that could be all you need. This could have been maybe an honorable mention because I misread it, but we're going to move on.
Our next one is Waxen's Shape Thief. 3 and a blue, creature shapeshifter. It's a 0/0. Flash. You may have this creature enter as a copy any artifact or creature you control as cycling 2. I like it quite a lot. I think I added it to the list. If you've seen any of our
gameplay videos. I had it on there too. But yeah, you and Joey plays Gyruda. You play the Crom with
Crom Sakashima copy everything. I love it for that. I already run all the other clones, so why not another one?
I mean, honestly, when it comes to looking at all of the clones, this one isn't the best. But if you had to eliminate one that didn't have the ability to copy an artifact, that makes this one a little bit better, because having the ability to hit an artifact, especially because of the One Ring meta, it does cost the same amount as a One Ring, but if you're not playing the One Ring, or if you just happen to get this instead of your One Ring, it can be a copy of that. But then also having cycling. You draw this, or you have it in your opening hand, and you're like, there's nothing out there to copy. I do not care. Arguably, I think this would be better than the Dockside meta, because it's just a thing you hold on to, and then you're like, oh, Dockside ain't coming? Okay, cycle it, draw a card. Fine. Yeah. Notably, it is a discard trigger, so that artifact that we talked about earlier, if you discard this because you're cycling it, you can draw a card, or you can ping somebody for 3, or you can make a treasure token. So it has that upside as well, and it has flash, to where you can maybe double up on a blocker. So yeah, it has its uses.
I love it for the Crom, personally. I think it can replace Dax. I run Dax Duplicate in the deck. I think it can replace that.
Yeah, I agree.
It can probably replace Mirror Hall Mimic or Undercover Operative.
Yeah, I mean, it's either an additional layer or it's slightly better than one of the cards you already have. Having cycling again, too, if you already have 3 other copies or 3 other shapeshifters in your hand, you just be like, okay, well, I'm going to cycle this one away to try and get a removal spell.
There's a very niche interaction. You can cast your Gilded Drake with the Gilded Drake trigger on the stack, flash this in as a copy of the Gilded Drake, and trade 2 Gilded Drakes for 2 of the things that people have.
Pretty good.
It's niche. It's niche, but it can happen. It's 6 mana. But
I don't hate that. As clones go, is this the best clone ever? No. But it is a clone that has a lot of upside, and that's why we included it.
Yeah. The next card we have on our list is also, I think, in the top 5, personally. It's Transit Mage. 2 and a blue, creature, human, wizard, 2/2. When this creature enters, you may search your library for an artifact card with mana value 4 or 5, reveal it, and put it in your hand, then shuffle.
Yeah, it's finishing off basically the cycle of you got Trinket Mage, you got Treasure Mage, you got Trophy Mage, you got Tribute Mage, you've got this Mage, you got that Mage. If you can comfortably run all of them, if you're in, I don't know if Urza can make slots for all of them, but Urza is a good example of the sense of you could run all of these to tutor any of the artifacts in your deck that you want. But this one, I'll read it off here because Kirk made
Kirk finds One Ring, Shorkai, Leveler, Mystic Forge, Birthing Pod, Machine Guns Effigy, Chain Veil, Aetherflux, and quite a few others.
There's a long
Kirk's
list.
Contribution.
Yeah.
I love this card.
I think it's pretty good.
Specifically, if you're running it in mono blue, there's the one card that has Wizard Cycling to find it. But
yeah, there's Step Through, and then there's also the Dalkin Aether Mage. In the current meta, just being able to tutor up a One Ring is pretty good.
This card does make it so you can easily find at least one of the pieces to a mono blue Thoracle combination. Because you find Leveler, you play Leveler, play Thoracle.
Yeah. Leveler is a very risky card, but I have seen it come back a little bit recently. So we got a couple more. What's next?
Yep. Lifecraft Engine. 3 mana. Artifact Vehicle. 4/4. As this vehicle enters, choose a creature type. Vehicle creatures you have are the chosen creature type in addition to their other types. Each creature you control of the chosen type other than this vehicle gets a +1/+1, crew 3. This one Kirk threw on the list, I do believe.
Kirk says that this is the best card for cEDH in the whole set. And I understand...
Specifically for Magda.
Yeah. Well, I understand that it is good for Magda because it is basically another artifact dwarf thing that, yes. All your vehicles are dwarfs now, and this is a dwarf, and yeah, they get the Anthem, but then also they can do the whole Magda combo because of...
And then they can tap to crew it, so you're getting the tap off the...
Getting the treasure off the taps and whatnot. Yes.
It can be found with Magda.
That's great. I will argue that that is the only deck that this card will see play in, so this isn't the best card in the set, and I've already expressed how high I am on some of the other cards, and so have you, so, well, that's where we all differ, but, we're human, and we all have our own opinions, and, I don't disagree. This is a great slam dunk into Magda, but I will not be playing this in
other vehicles in her.
Any of my decks. No, not at all.
Yeah, I think this is specifically just a Magda card, and
I do.
That's fine. Magda is a great deck, and it's going to be a good card. It can replace one or two of the other, or it can replace one of the other vehicles that is not as good in Magda with this, which it will be better.
Agreed.
All right.
And then
our last card on the list. Yeah. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah, so this one is also a Kirk edition, and I saw this earlier. We talked about one of the cards in the series. It's another Gear Hulk. This one is Bright Glass Gear Hulk. Apparently, there's already a Reddit thread that Kirk referenced that already figured out how this can be a game ender in particular decks.
Reading the rest of the card, it is green, white, artifact creature construct, 4/4. First strike and trample. When this creature enters, you may search your library for up to 2 artifact, creature, and or enchantment cards of mana value 1 or less, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. The combo line, do you want to go over the combo line?
Yeah, so he basically said that this is a combo line in Derevi. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Derevi, it's a Bant, bird, wizard. Those of you who have been in the sphere for a long time. Derevi's a classic commander. If you want to read it off, go ahead.
Derevi, big text is, whenever Derevi Imperial Tactician enters the battlefield, or a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may tap or untap target permanent. And it has 1 green, white, blue, put Derevi onto the battlefield from the command zone.
It's kind of like, it was the predecessor to like Yuriko, where it could cheat command tax because it always has the ability to come in. That part not isn't.
It is a 3-cost commander, which is how this works in the combo.
So you have Derevi on the field, and you pod it into this Gear Hulk. So you have to sacrifice it to Birthing Pod to go into the Gear Hulk, because Derevi is a 3-mana commander, and Gear Hulk is a 4-mana commander, or a 4-mana creature. So you pod into it. From there, Gear Hulk says that you go and get the 2 of any of the types that you want. In this case, you're going to go for 2 artifacts, and it is, you tutor up LED, Lion's Eye Diamond, which is a 0 cost, and Lotus Petal, which is also 0 cost, because it says 1 or less on those things. Then you use those artifacts to put Derevi back into play, which I'm assuming is based on that activated ability, not the commander tax version. When it comes into play, it has that ETB untap a thing, so you untap your Birthing Pod. From there, you sack it again, and you go find RX Salvagers, which is a 4-mana white creature. From there, you can create infinite mana from there, you put Derevi back into play, and you pod it into Emil, which is also a 4 mana creature. Emil has pay 3, blink, basically exile and return a creature to field. Or you can get Displacer Kitten, which is the same thing. You cast something and it does the thing. So then from there, you flicker the Gear Hulk, and then you find Esper Sentinel with its ETB trigger. Then he says Flicker Derevi, which is based off of either cast it or using the mana that you have available to flicker with Emil, or you cast the Esper and you get the trigger off Displacer Kitten. So you flicker Derevi. Derevi comes back. You untap the Birthing Pod. Then you use the Birthing Pod to sacrifice the Sentinel and go to get the 2-drop Fairy Mastermind. Fairy Mastermind has activated ability where you can force everybody to draw. So from there, with your infinite mana, you activate Fairy Mastermind infinite times, have everybody draw their deck. You can also, in between there, once you find your own Angel's Grace, you cast it so that you can resolve your draws without killing yourself, and then just basically win the game. You can force them, or you can just pass. Either way. He notated that Lotus Petal could also be Mox Soul Pool, Chrome Mock, etc., depending on what you get. But it does require the pod Derevi plus 4 mana to get the line started. As we described earlier, Esper Sentinel doesn't necessarily need to be Esper Sentinel. It can be Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarch, anything.
Any 1-drop creature.
1-drop creature, right. And then you can even pod one of the 1-drops into Grand Abolisher before going for the Fairy Mastermind just to have your protection. So it is a very convoluted line, but it's pretty self-contained, and Derevi already does weird shit like this already, so it's not like you're really reaching to do this. So
you're adding one more card in the deck.
Right. You're just adding another card that can potentially help you win. So I can see it there. I don't see that card is really good anywhere else unless you're able to pod, and maybe there's some sort of line with the if you're in Bant also, like with that repurposing thing. The artifact line. There might be some artifact line too. People are going to figure out more stuff what's it to do with,
once it sees play a bit more, right, and people test it out. Yeah,
right, exactly. There may be other lines with this too, but I only glossed it over because I was like, get 2 1-drops, like who cares? That seems bad, but
just looking back on all the cards for our top 10, once again, Lifecraft Engine, I think Kirk said is his number 1. What would you consider your number 1 in this?
Out of the top 10, I'm torn between the Repurposing Bay and the House Squad Heavy. I think the Repurposing Bay as a blue artifact birthing pod is really good, but I also don't really play any blue artifact decks. The House Squad Heavy, to me, is really good because it slots right into my Tymna deck. It can slot right into my Winota deck, and it can slot into any deck, which I'm not currently running, but I have run in the past. Any of those old decks that I played Snoop Pile, it seems like a shoe-in. That's actually, I'm just going to say it. That's my favorite card from the set. It's an innocuous Gabo.
Yeah, mine is definitely Repurposing Bay. I can just see so much use for it with a artifact birthing pod.
Yeah. I agree. I'm just not on a list like that, and I'm on lists that are like looking for better Tymna attackers, better Winota attackers. Yep. I have a few other lists too, and that card just slots right in. And even like I said in casual, like that's a good Krenko card. It's a good card in any deck that's running Snoop. So yep. I like it. Perfect time to end it. Rev, thank you so much for joining me. Of course. It was nice to get a different perspective because obviously the three of us all had different opinions, and I'm glad that Kirk was able to at least provide his opinion on the
write
notes.
Some stuff down for us,
right? So we could at least mention it. Going forward, I'm going to try and push again for like bi-weekly episodes. So you all have known us for being, NoFX is like me and Kirk, but going forward, it may be more of just me and one or more of the stream team guys because we're all doing this thing together at this point. So thank you all for watching. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. If you think we missed something, you think we rated something higher than you would have, let us know. We're down to argue in the comments. That's always fun.
You have to join the Discord. We're in there all the time, talking, shooting shit. We'll play games in there if you ever want to play some games with us.
I am looking to start a weekly game session again as well. It has died down a little bit, so looking to get a weekday game day that people can know that every week it's going to be a thing and get that going. If you like the content, I've got a Patreon. There's additional benefits. You can talk to us about your builds. We can help you with deck building and brews and all that kind of stuff. There's merch, playmats, etc. I actually have something new in the works as well for t-shirts and playmats and whatnot that's going to be coming out pretty soon. So look forward to that.
Don't forget, it is the Possibility Storm on Patreon.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, that's pretty much all we got for today. We will, as I said, I'm going to try to get push for this to be bi-weekly again. So hopefully we'll have something out within the next couple weeks. Until then, we'll see you guys very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a good one.